This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today I have one of my favorite people in the wrestling business, former Pancrase fighter, Pride fighter, KSW, Strike Force. He's wrestled for New Japan, fought for UFC, wrestled for TNA, wrestled for AEW, and now he has his own company, Bloodsport. Josh Barnett, how are you doing today, sir?
Pretty good. And there could be a blood force in the future. Who knows?
Yeah, I was thinking of Strike Force, but of course, as far as Bloodsport, you just fought John Moxley in Japan, the debut of your promotion in Japan. Any thoughts on that match? He ended up beating you after you defeated him the first time.
Well, I mean, anytime you get into the ring with somebody that is world champion level, like anything is possible. He's not entirely new at all to this format either, because he's been in actually quite a few of our shows and done quite well for himself, other than losing to me the one time. And at the time, he was the IWGP heavyweight champion. So he was really feeling himself, really at his peak. So, I know as a competitor, you don't always sit around thinking about every match you've had that didn't go your way. However, there are those ones that always sit in the back of your mind that if given another shot, you feel like you could go out there and change the story, the tone of how the world sees the relationship between you and that opponent. Not to mention in the back of your own mind, it changes things for you. It's a bit of a vindication, even without it being necessarily a victory. Let's say somebody went out there and they had a really bad showing, and then they come out in a rematch and show that no, I was always capable of hanging in there with this guy. Well, it's a little different when you're John Moxley. So, he came out there and he found a will to win, which is what makes him so dangerous. The guy is a never quit, never give up kind of guy. And in any professional wrestling ring in the world, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that could go out there and take the victory over him. And well, it was a fine margin, but within that small margin, he found the recipe for success. So, that's the way it goes.
And I understand he's doing some grappling tournaments now too, and actually won some type of tournament in Cincinnati not too long ago.
Yeah, he competes here and there. He has an incredibly insane schedule. Probably, I'd argue, greater than anybody he's going to face on the mats. So he just does it for the fun of it. And in the day that we live in, where everything gets to be social media projected and put out there for the whole world, every little tiny little minutia, even a small Naga tournament or whatever. I mean, I've talked to John. I've been working with him when I can too. We are great rivals and competitors, but we're good friends. And ultimately, like, I'm not out here to lose to anybody. Not really a fan of it, but when you go out there and you have to tie him up and go head to head with somebody that not only do you know that in the industry is one of the best there is in the world, but him personally, and that he's a quality guy who's never going to give you any less than his all. So I don't have any problem trying to make, essentially in this case, one of my rivals stronger, because who you beat and what capability they have is directly reflects on the level of that victory. How much importance goes into it. Anyways, so I want to face the strongest that I always can. But I know he's gone out there before and won some smaller tournaments and things like that. He just likes to get in the experience, and I don't know how much he's always able to train right now, especially being a full-time dad and a full-time wrestler. But he really loves it. He really loves it, and I totally love the fact that he loves getting out on the mats. I don't love the fact that social media likes to use it as an opportunity to cudgel somebody, which, you know, it could be this, it could be something else. But at the end of the day, you know, John's awesome. And, you know, it was, I'm glad he's out doing what he's doing where he's living now. They've got a lovely setup and it's amazing for them. And their little one is going to grow up in a great community and household. But selfishly, I liked it also when he was in Vegas. He could just come over here a lot easier.
Yeah, and also I find, at least at the smaller gyms, if you're somewhat of a celebrity, everyone wants to grapple you and film it, and it's really not that fun. Where I'm guessing at your gym and the bigger ones in Vegas, it's more higher caliber fighters, and you're not going to run into those issues.
I think you could find that anywhere, to be perfectly honest, especially in a sport that could be as dog eat dog as MMA, especially is right now. I mean, not to say that it always hasn't had some color of that nature, but I think with the way social media has impacted everything, and I don't want to, you know, sound like I'm just beating a dead horse here, but it has increased that element manyfold. So you could go to a gym full of active UFC competitors who, you know, you come across those gyms where it seems to be like a farm almost, even regardless of whether or not this gym is full of all like the best guys, or they just somehow have a way to keep getting their dudes in the show. But in any case, you know, a known place, you could go somewhere like that and still have people trying to shine themselves off of something they've done in the gym. You know, even if they're not out there filming your rolls and trying to post them up there, they're out there doing interviews saying how much they got you the other day or something. You're just like, okay, man, you know, that's that's pretty immature. But with any place that I'm running, there's none of that bullshit's allowed. Whether you are a hobbyist, just training, or let's just say, like, I've trained Hollywood actors and actresses before, and they have to get in there and get to work on the mats with my students like anybody else. And you know, I also expect my students to be like, oh, holy shit, there's that gal from that TV show that I really like. It's like, okay, great, you know, they're here to do the same thing as you right now, so you're gonna treat them like anybody else. And that also includes it, whether they were or weren't famous, whether they are or are not good looking, or any of these other little factors that might play into it. It can't, if I see that becoming an issue, if I see somebody act in a way that I felt is anything less than what our standards should be in the gym, you're going to get hell from me, and that's the last thing anybody wants.
Yeah, I understand that. Is it true you were in anger management classes when you were younger?
Yes, but that for entirely different reasons.
Okay. But you seem so calm. So when I read that, I was like, I guess over the years, you've just changed and mellowed out a little bit.
Not really, exactly. I maybe mellowed in some ways, compartmentalized it in others, but really, as a kid, what that was really just stemming from emotional immaturity. And I'm not saying that I even necessarily feel like I was in the wrong for the things that I ended up you know, getting in trouble for, so to speak. But you have to know. You just go into the Kenny Rogers. You got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. So being really young, you don't really understand how to deal with certain situations very, very, not just very well, but understanding the deeper and greater ramifications of what's happening, and not knowing how to maintain your sense of public respect and things like that, at the same time as not also treading into areas that society the last 30, 40 years isn't very comfortable with. 40 years, 50 years. And, you know, just learning how to deal with all that, and also just trying to understand the dynamics of being a social animal like we all are. So, you know, kids got to grow up. The same kids that could be in my position who didn't really take too well to being bullied or harassed or harangued, could also be the same sense where the kids that use a lot of bullying and haranguing, harassing, because seeing how it may get them attention that they think is positive or worthwhile, using those tactics themselves to try and elevate themselves. And it's a cycle, one's doing one thing, one's doing the other, but yet at the same time, a lot of it's stemming often from the same place, just immature kids. So, really the thing I think that's more important is not the fact that kids are going to have emotional immaturity or more like knee-jerk reactions to things at times, or even not react at all and really just penetrate all that deep into themselves in a really unhealthy manner as well. All these things stem from the same kind of immaturity, being kids. And really the onus is you have to be an adult of a certain capability and understanding of children, yourself, the greater world. You have to be made of better stuff to know how to more properly handle these things, more so than just pulling out your little manual and saying never hit or don't do this or whatever stupid platitude that is absolutely brain dead and without really any deeper understanding of how social dynamics and people and kids and all these things work. That's what I would say. I would say more so than anything, I don't really look at kids with high energy, high emotional content or any of these things as being necessarily the problem. I think that's the norm outside of, and we could get into arguments about how these things display themselves today that they didn't display themselves before, but it's coming from the same impetus.
As far as who put on this Bloodsport in Japan, was it still GCW or was there some type of Japanese sponsor presenting that event?
No, this was something that me and my Japanese crew put together ourselves. So I was approached by Rakuten Tickets, by a person from Rakuten Tickets about doing some events or whatever the case may be, through my Japanese agent. And we took a meeting and sat down and I explained the concept and forwarded a bunch of video and other things and I made my pitch. And they found an ear, and that ear was receptive to what we had to offer. And then, away we went. There's a Bloodsport Inc. office that I have out there in Japan for doing these events, and just a great network of people that I've collected along the years that are really capable of doing great things for us, as well as finding the other necessary components to help make these kind of events happen. And then, I don't know, decades of goodwill in and amongst professional wrestling in Japan and in the world that I'm able to call upon to help me try to build these events in whatever way we can.
I found it interesting, and I don't think he ended up coming to the event, but Mike O'Hearn was booked for it. What happened there? Because it seems weird that he'd be involved with it. I know he's got a martial arts background, but he's been out of pro wrestling for so long.
Well, it's only weird because people don't really think of Mike that way. And if they look it up, they'll find a reference to his judo background. But, no one's ever really, I think he's done professional wrestling in his past also, by the way. Like, he was scouted by major organizations, I believe, back in the day, which that's not really much of a surprise. And he's had training, but Mike always saw his path being different. So he never really followed that career path through. And he's Mike O'Hearn. He's doing the deal exactly like he wanted to do it. But he's perfect for professional wrestling, to be perfectly honest. And I really wish it would have been able to come to fruition, but unfortunately there ended up being a scheduling conflict due to previous agreements he had with another group for work he's got to do for them. And we had to just step out of the way of that, because ultimately we're trying to do things where people, they're doing this voluntarily. They're choosing to be a part of what we do. I'm not flagging them down and making them offers they can't refuse in either sense, either with terms or with like intimidation or favors. Or it's nothing like that. It's people, if they're into it, if they're down, the show happens. And if they're not, or if something doesn't work for them, then, and we can't make it amenable, then it doesn't, and everybody's copacetic. So when you see my shows, realize that probably, I would say, a overwhelming percentage of the names that you'll see on these shows, especially the bigger ones, are there because they hit me up or they expressed interest or something of that nature. Like they've chose and wanted to be a part of this, which is great because it makes it so much easier to put these shows together and to try and get the best out of everyone, and the best performance you can in the ring, because they're choosing to. They're not there because they're clocking in, and they're not there because they're forced to, or they're desperate. They're there because they're like, we think this is cool, and we want to do what we can to make it as cool as possible.
Well, I hope to see him there in the future. Sean has a good question here. Any chance Steve Blackman could appear in Bloodsport?
I have no idea. I mean, as far as I know, when it comes to guys like that, I mean, it's always fun to speculate, and people bring this stuff up all the time. But I think we get caught in a little time warp in our head, and we always remember these people as they were, maybe only a few years removed from when we last were really watching them. But the reality is that these years have been many, and a lot can happen in that time. Not just kind of guys' body breakdown or this or that, sure, and typical, but really more so even, do they even want to do this anymore? Do they want to wrestle this way? Do they want to do this sort of? And a lot of times these guys, like, nah, they're good. They've put their time in and they're past it. So people would bombard me about Guido Maritato film, and I'm like, that guy's amazing. I thought he was a fantastic. And James Maritato as Guido, Nunzio, I guess, all these different names. But he said it himself not that long ago. He's like, look, man, I'm just too old for that now. Like, the body's not there. It's not really where he's got so many miles on his body. Which is another thing. It's easy if you're just on the outside looking in and you're not somebody in the business. It's easy to just see guys on television over time and be like, oh yeah, and they're still moving around and all this. If you were James Maritato and let's just not even talk about any of the whatever indie wrestling or other smaller promotions, but okay, he's in UWFI, he's doing a stint there, which is really hard going wrestling. Then you go and you're in ECW, you're in WWE, you're doing dates after dates after dates after dates after dates. I mean, this stuff, rain, shine, snow, light, dark, injured or not, you got it, you're in the ring. So it really does take its toll on you. And to think that just because we've seen some good pictures of them, or maybe working a show here or there, like, oh yeah, well, yeah, just slot this guy in. The fact is, it's like, even if we wanted to, a lot of times these guys are like, yo, we're just sorry, maybe I could get one out of somebody, or generally they're just like, I wish I'd have seen this 10 years ago. And you can't fault them for it in any sense. But it's just the nature of the business. And there's some guys that won't even be as old as James Maritato who are just like, nah. I hit up, I've hit up some guys that used to be in WWE over the years, recent as well as in the past, and they're like, they are in good shape, they're good to go, and they're far younger, and yet their feelings are like, nah, no, just not doing wrestling, or not, that I don't really feel like that that kind of style is something I could really excel at or suits me or a variety of things. And at the end of the day, you just go, thanks, dude. Thanks for having the conversation and no big deal because you don't owe me anything. If we could make something cool, we will.
We actually had Guido against Harry Smith up here for our promotion, Great North Wrestling, last year, and Harry Smith beat him. So there you go. You got the better of the fighters working for you now. As far as Rampage Jackson, you brought him back. He's done a little bit of pro wrestling, but it was nice to see him part of the company. Was that hard to convince him?
Not really. I mean, we go way, way, way back. And I just recently did his Jackson podcast. So if you want to hear a bit more about our past, I would tune into that because even on the show, both he and I talked about the fact that people, they don't, either they don't know, they've forgotten, whatever the case may be. I used to train Rampage and we were sparring partners for years. We've been really close friends for a long time and we've done a lot of stuff together. But people just kind of like, whatever. And for me, it was just a matter of hitting them up, showing them what I was doing and saying, we're going to Japan. So, hey, you want to come along? I'm sure I could find a guy who'll step up in front of you. And Hideki Sekine, Shrek, was easy to get to go in there and to face Rampage as well. So hopefully, Quentin will be more than game to keep doing these and keep going back to Japan at the very least. I thought he had a great debut.
If Haku was younger, he would have been perfect for this. But how do you think Haku would have done in probably No Holds Barred if it had been more popular in his prime? I know he was more of a street fighter, but as a fighter and a wrestler yourself, what do you think about his reputation?
I'm sure it's well earned. And he's a big, strong, physical guy with a very good physical and athletic past. I think, yes, he is. He's probably really far too old to be doing this sort of thing now, and not just Bloodsport, but guys put in his miles. So I'm sure, as much as if there was like a like fresh infusion of youth into him, I'm sure he'd love to do it, but. He's been in rings and had matches with people and in places that, are just amazing. So, yes, I see in the chat, no shit, Haku's retired. Duh. But in the past, if he was somebody that was interested in doing No Holds Barred, I think he would have been fairly successful. Would he have been like the king of all kings and champ of champs? I don't think so, but I think that would have been, a lot of it would have been due to the fact of having dual loyalties to doing professional wrestling and fighting at the same time, and the fact that pro wrestling, especially back then, wasn't really going to give him the extra time to really invest into a No Holds Barred career. And there would be things that would be really needed for him in terms of like how to deal with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, especially with the guard playing and all that. Such an unusual scenario to find yourself in, to be fighting a guy on the ground in that way, where they would willingly go to their back and work from there, which in I think everybody's mind was a submissive position that would not have the ability to really put authority over your opponents. But as we learned, there's a lot you can do from there. And when you think about it, it's like all your faculties are in front of you now. You're watching, you're visually tracking and identifying things. You've got both hands, both feet, both shins and knees and elbows. So your ability to manipulate an object is actually a lot easier than old school catch and folk style, where you're wrestling in the down position, but you're making sure to keep your back off the mat. Which, funnily enough, that's what you see the most of in MMA now. You don't see people playing guard almost at all. It's more like a holdover spot until they get a little bit of a breath or recovery. Then they start fighting up in a wrestling fashion, giving up their back, hand fighting, and getting up to their feet. Hakuho the GOAT. We're not talking about sumo, bud. Yes, Haku also did sumo at some point, but not at the level of Hakuho. And Hakuho is amazing, but irrelevant. Anyways, Haku, I'm sure would have been terror back in the day. And win, lose, or draw, I don't think anybody would have been able to look at Haku and been like, "Oh, you lost a fight. Oh, you suck," or "You beat that guy. You're the great." I think everyone would have just been like, "Yeah, I think we all knew you were a badass." And while this is some sort of proof, like you're just Haku's that guy that if you beat him in a fight, you wouldn't try it again. And if you saw him lose a match, maybe, which it would be impressive to see if you could find him actually like being dominantly beaten. I just don't see it. He's that guy that like you would avoid on the come up because you're like, this would be way too much effort no matter what. Like you don't get out of this without getting hurt somehow if you even get the win. I just think he's that guy. He's just crazy tough and probably just hell to deal with. And you never get away with it with running into him without leaving hurt somehow. If he didn't hurt you and take you out.
And I have noticed those Samoan guys, they seem to have, and I'm not saying this to be racist or anything, but they have thicker skulls that seem to be able to absorb more punishment. You fought Mark Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice anything like that with a guy like him, that they just seem to be able to take a lot of punishment?
Well, I mean, I could see it in tape prepping for him, but I honestly didn't have to. He didn't land a single punch against me, and I didn't get hit once in that fight. And I only really hit him with like a few like bits of ground and pound to open him up and get him to move around. But he's got a big head. Maybe it's thicker. I'm not entirely sure. I suppose we could get some sort of legitimate anthropologist on it. They could maybe start taking some measurements of Pacific Islander skulls or something over time. And although I think another thing that might play a factor is a lot of these Pacific Islander types, regardless of where they're from, in terms of their tribal background or their native background, they're heavyweight. And by being heavyweight, they are not cutting a ton of weight, which leaves much more of the water and fluids that would be surrounding and protecting the brain intact. So it's going to go a long way toward you being able to take a punch. But yeah, I mean, have I fought many? Yeah, I don't know. I suppose guys that can take a beating. I mean, look, Alex or Minotauro Nogueira. I mean, he's as Brazilian as they come. Boy, when that guy's chin was intact, he could just take a beating.
Yeah, I just noticed when I wrestled Haku, he's like, hit me as hard as you want. And it seemed like it didn't bother him at all. So it was nice. Tito Ortiz is another guy that's dabbled in pro wrestling. I know he tried to get a WWE contract at one point. What's your relationship like with him, and is he someone you would give a shot to?
No, I don't think he really has any capability of doing pro wrestling whatsoever. I remember seeing his debut, so to speak, on TNA way back in the day. I think there was this whole like clusterfuck with him and Hall and Nash and I forget who else. And he was supposed to come out there as like the guest referee. I'm going to be the enforcer on this bout. I forget whose match it was, and like there'll be no funny business because Huntington Beach bad boy Tito Ortiz is here, and he lays everybody out. And then, of course, all the boys are just sitting there looking at and going like, he has no idea what to do now. Like, we told him to do this, but I mean, honestly, wrestling is improv. It doesn't stop until you're in the back or cameras are off, whatever. Like, you're on. So they all start getting up. I'll start moving around, and he lost his shit. You could tell, you could see somebody who looked like they're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with no land in sight. And it was hilarious to watch him just come to a quick understanding that it's not about like pretending to hit people in overly comical ways. there's a whole lot more to pro wrestling than that. And I don't really think he's made for it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, because he did have a full week tryout at WWE that he was blogging about 2 years ago. So obviously that probably didn't go well for him either.
No, if he was capable of doing pro wrestling, he would have been doing it by now.
What do you think about Tank Abbott as a fighter? Speaking of Tito Ortiz, they used to work together.
Mm-hmm. I think Tank's fantastic. I think he's hilarious. I've always had a really good relationship with Tank. I had to wrestle him once in IGF, and I haven't seen that match on tape, so I don't know whether it was good or not. But you know, Tank's awesome. I think he enjoyed pro wrestling. I don't know how much he really took to it at the end of the day. I can't really recall like much of his library, but smart dude, loved to fight. And, there was always something special there with him. He was a legitimate 600-pound bencher or whatever. He could punch like hell. He was a wrestler. I'm sure more specialized and dedicated training could have helped him out a lot, but it was all in his own hands. But you knew that you were in for a fight if you had Tank in front of you.
We saw Nick Khan was at one of your Bloodsport shows. Obviously, you trained Shayna Baszler. She's been appearing. Matthew wants to know any chance of Chad Gable or Karrion Kross in Bloodsport. Karrion Kross seems like a guy that might actually get over more in a place like Bloodsport.
Well, he's done 2 of them prior to going to the WWE, so that would be easy to do. It's up to the company. And if that's something that would work out and they were available, then it's possible. Or is it something that we're like hounding them about? No. But look, we have the Creed brothers on this show. We've got Shayna Baszler, so anything is possible.
Yeah, your next show is coming up this month. July 28th in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. What else can you tell us about that event?
Well, it's Bloodsport 11. We feel like we've got great momentum leading into this from WrestleMania week, from Japan, and we just made sense to try and put this card together at this time. We aren't going to do a ton of shows a year, and that's on purpose. We feel like it's best to keep these special. Plus, Brett has a very full dance card with all he's doing with GCW, and that takes a ton of time, a ton of responsibility and logistics. And these Bloodsport shows are meant to be special events, not you just turn on the TV every week and catch them. That'd be a completely different discussion. But we've got, I just announced that Josh Woods from Ring of Honor, former collegiate wrestler, as well as someone that's been around the fight business a long time, been a part of, quite a few UFC level guys and other MMA fighters fight camps, helping them prepare. I've always heard like really great things about him. And I know that coming to Bloodsport has been something that's been on his radar for a long time, but conversely, it's been on ours to get him in here. And so we've got him showing up. We have Matt Makowski returning, former Bellator veteran, GCW and Bloodsport veteran. You always know that you're going to get a hell of a match out of him. We've got Miyu Yamashita, who's going to be taking on Shayna Baszler. So you've got a kicker with a karate background from Japan, a very talented professional wrestler from Tokyo Joshi Pro, meeting, a person born up in learning how to professional wrestle from the basis of essentially the shoot style and what you might find in Bloodsport, and then moving into the direction of the WWE.
Someone's asking if you think you'll ever be in the UFC Hall of Fame.
No, I don't think so. I don't think they'll ever put me in the Hall of Fame. I think there's too much history maybe between all of us, and who knows. But I just don't ever see that happening. And I don't live to be recognized necessarily by Hall of Fames. I'm not going to act like I don't care about those things, or I'm too big good for it, because I'm none of those things. I actually appreciate the pomp and circumstance of these kind of aspects of the industry. I mean, hell, I have given lifetime achievement awards to Eric Paulson and to Yoshiaki Fujiwara. So I myself really feel honored when given the opportunity to recognize these individuals, especially to those that I figure probably don't really know them, or maybe have forgotten, or any number of reasons why this person isn't really known to the fan base. In Eric Paulson's case, he's been out of MMA in the spotlight anyways for some time. But also, he pro wrestled in IGF. I brought him over there to work for Inoki, and he's also been a trainer and been a massive presence behind the development of shoot and catch wrestling in the United States for a very long time. And that is really big in what we do with Bloodsport and professional wrestling in general. And then, of course, with Yoshiaki Fujiwara, it's also a matter of, do people in the States really know him and his legacy, as well as these younger audiences that might not know him as well in Japan as I think they should. So it was just, I'm into that stuff. But as for me being in the UFC Hall of Fame, I just don't ever see that happening. So, oh well.
You won Performance of the Night with UFC Fight of the Night twice. Do you think it's time for UFC to finally boost their performance bonuses past 50,000, given how profitable the company is now?
Maybe. I think it would be a far better thing to make adjustments in regards to the contract structures, depending on the placement on the cards that particular fighters are, as well as pay-per-view points and incentives towards increasing their paydays by what they draw. I think that would be more important than just making a bigger bonus, because a bigger bonus is just something that happens randomly across an event, which I mean, look, if you're not going out there trying to totally disassemble your opponent, which should equal something highlight reel worthy, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, there's too many guys that are out there just trying to get by. They blow weight on purpose because they know that 20% and whatever, it's worth it to get that win and climb the ladder and get more notoriety under your name and build leverage than it is even to necessarily get an extra 10, 20, $30,000 on the night. Let alone if they could win that 50 grand, which you don't know. I mean, Victor Henry knocked out his last opponent, and yet other fights on that card got picked over him. His debut against Raoni Barcelos, he had just a massive volume war with his opponent. Was the I don't know, there was like some statistic about, as a newcomer, what the odds were and all this kind of stuff, and blah blah blah. Like he's got some stuff under his belt from that initial debut, and he did not win any performance bonus that night either. So I mean, you can have a great performance, you could set some sort of records at the time, and you still might not get anything. So I think it would be them at 50 grand. That's not a problem. The bonus, the performance bonus at $50,000 isn't too little or too much, and it's enough, I think. But what would go a lot longer is to have contracts that better reflected the ability for higher known, maybe higher ranked, it's not just but the athletes that can draw, allowing them to draw that money. because it's not money that you pull out of thin air and give them guaranteed. It's money that they get by essentially proving why they're the semi-main event, or they're on the poster, or they're the main event, or things of that nature. Because you don't put people in those positions that don't draw, that don't put asses in the seats. So if they're capable of doing it, give them the ability to monetize that, and everybody will be a whole lot happier.
As far as Billy Robinson, who was a mentor to you and a trainer, Dark Side of the Ring or Tales from the Territory recently did a episode where they claim that Peter Maivia ripped out his eye. Did he ever tell you about this story? Because I know he had both of his eyes when he passed away. Could you shed any light on it?
I mean, maybe he got into a scrap with Peter Maivia, and Peter Maivia attacked one of his eyes. I mean, it's all possible, but like Vader's eye was sticking out, and he just popped it back in and kept doing his fight, whatever you want to call it, with Stan Hansen. Sure, maybe, but I think I think fans are getting too caught up in thinking what it would be like for them to have Peter Maivia, pull on their eye or dig at their eye. No, you would not survive. You'd think it'd be the end of the world. Your eye's probably coming right out of your head. You're right. But you're not Billy Robinson. And you're not Peter Maivia. You're not Haku, and you're not, and the list goes on. When these guys go and scrap, it's a completely different story. So what? Peter Maivia maybe went after Billy's eye. That don't mean shit. You know what I mean? It's like there's probably, and I'm not trying to expound upon the story itself. I don't really know it as far as like being told direct to me from Billy or Peter Maivia. I don't even know if Peter Maivia is still alive. Anyways,
I'm pretty sure he's passed away now.
Okay. But there could be some like really big name guy in this era. It's less likely, but there could be, who has that kind of nasty, down and dirty attitude towards street fighting in let's say AEW or WWE. And I could get into a scrap with them, and they could go after my eye. They're not going to win, and if anybody plucks mine, they're losing two of theirs. I'll look cool in an eye patch, and we'll see how you handle a cane. But it's just, I think some of it was back in the day with working, because it was an industry that, well, I mean, could end up in places where they're going to stiff you over money. Some guy's really going to shoot on you. All kinds of them. Some wrestlers might decide to try and jump you and steal your. Any wild ass thing could happen. It was a different era, different time. Everything wasn't so policed and oversaw by a million billion cameras and eyes at all times. And you couldn't just go to the public and be like, "Hey, this guy was a jerk to me and he did this." The public, like, you're not even supposed to talk about what actually happens and what the business is. So back then, I mean, you have plenty of guys that came from a shooter background, and to be honest, to really get into the ring in professional wrestling, you had to be capable. If you couldn't fight, for the most part, in some degree, you weren't showing up there. They would just weed you out, grind you to dust, take your money, and send you on your way, like from a tryout or whatever. I didn't mean like, and that goes from like, you've got your Billy Robinson and your Iron Sheiks, who all have legitimate amateur backgrounds, or you might have someone like even the Road Warriors, who were not guys with, I don't know that they ever even wrestled in high school. Maybe, they were like lifelong athlete guys, but they were street fighting and being dormant. You got to be tough. So if you couldn't be tough, if you couldn't legitimately fight to some degree, a lot of times, like, you weren't stepping in between those ropes. But that being able to fight doesn't necessarily mean that you're a quote unquote like trained shooter. So if you should happen to run into one of these guys, what would you do if you can't actually shoot? Well, you go after their eyes, you go after their, you fish hook, you headbutt, you do all this other stuff. Totally given as something that if you didn't want some shooter to try and break your arm off and beat you to death with it, I could see somebody employing such tactics, or biting. A street fight's a street fight. It's not It's not a match in the ring. It's different. But whether or not Peter Maivia damaged or hurt Billy's eye or doesn't matter, or did not. It's irrelevant, because that doesn't necessarily mean that Peter Maivia won the fight either, or that at the end of the day, whatever it was, they didn't settle their differences and call it good. And Billy's eyes worked fine enough to tell me or whoever else that you're fucking it up, do it again, whatever. So it's just you got to remember, dark side of the who knows, it doesn't matter. These are meant to entertain and sensationalize. These are not meant to necessarily always tell a very plain, simple truth.
That is 100% true. And as far as Mark Kerr, who The Rock is doing a movie on, I know you've grappled him a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to have any role in this movie by any chance? Because I know some real fighters are. And what are your thoughts on Mark Kerr?
No, I'm not going to be within 50 feet of that movie, I'm sure. Whoever is sewn up on the stunt and action team side, and I guess consulting side, they've locked it all up. They've got their buddies in. They've got whoever they felt that they could get a hold of. I've got I know some of the people on the set, and I think they're fantastic. But no, there were decisions made already. That's not how Hollywood works. Hollywood is not, hey, we need to find the exact perfect dude who knows and this and that. No. That's not how Hollywood works. Like, oh, I'm going to get all my buddies in, or I'm going to use my network. Well, how about does this guy even look like so-and-so? Doesn't matter. Close enough. He's in my network. He gets shuttled in. Or you'll get a lot of people in the stunt action choreography stuff who are going to like, oh yeah, I can do that. The number one thing in Hollywood is to always say you can do whatever it is they're asking you to do, even if you have no fucking clue. So I know I've done fight choreography for some small movies before, and I've done all my own choreography for my fight scenes, essentially, minus one that I still was able to add some different little improvisations and changes to, but it came to me as a whole set together previs, and it's like, well, the person you're going to be working with has been working off of this the whole time, and if you're going to make a bunch of changes or switches up, it's not quite the same. So in this case, this is just standard Hollywood stuff. It's not against me, by the way. It isn't like personal. It's just the way that the business works, and some of that is, you could call it nepotism or cronyism, but honestly, there's a thing that I think people don't really consider, and that is one, movies are millions of dollars, millions upon millions of dollars invested into creating these projects. And even with tons and tons and tons of capital, shit still goes wrong. Look at the new Roadhouse movie. But with doing these films, you want people that you can trust, people that are not shitheads, that aren't going to be running their mouths to people they shouldn't be. They're going to have a good attitude on set. They're going to be professionals that are going to be where they need to be when they need to be there. They're not going to be out there trying to be star fuckers the whole time, and they're going to get on with everybody. And you can count on them to take care of business, and that's massive. So if you want to get into film and movies, be somebody that they actually want to have around and that they can depend on, and you'll see a lot of things go your direction, even if you're way over your head.
Now, you've beat Frank Mir before in MMA. He's dabbled in pro wrestling. Has he reached out at all to you about Bloodsport?
Not since the first one, no.
Okay. As far as you as a pro wrestler, a lot of people don't realize, I think you had your first match in 2003 IWGP heavyweight title match against Yuji Nagata. So you've been in actually wrestling for decades. Is this something that you always wanted to be in, or did the opportunity just arise after you became a great MMA fighter?
Well, I was always a big fan of professional wrestling, especially Japanese wrestling. And I never, to be honest, I didn't really think that it was something I would find myself in, or I kind of had the faint idea that I could maybe do like some matches here or there, maybe at some point in Japan, but I never really thought of it as something that would be uh, such a massive portion of my life. I understood that pro wrestling and MMA were two sides of the same coin. But yeah, I guess when I was younger. Now it's also hard to. This conversation sounds like we're talking about somebody who's like 35, and then no, I started fighting at 19 years old, so my career decisions were made by somebody that was under to just over 21 years old. So I was really young into this, and MMA was super young. Maybe not super young, but it was young enough that there was still a lot of uncharted territory and a lot of new things happening and coming about, things dying, things coming to life, stuff happening all over the entire world, all at once, it seemed like at times. So trying to navigate that was enough. Basically, this just all stemmed from the fact that I saw Tsuyoshi Saka, a good friend and a former training partner of mine, in New Japan fighting for this NWF belt in this little tournament. And I was just like, I gotta, if he's there, maybe that could be my end. And then it seemed like, okay, maybe this is possible. And I will say that I was offered to wrestle Shinya Hashimoto in Wrestle One or Hustle, or while I was still in the UFC. I think it was Wrestle One, but I forget. It wasn't. Maybe I don't think it was 0-1. I think it was a co-promoted thing with Ryzen. I mean, sorry, Pride or something of that nature back then. It's been a long time because I think I was like 23 or 22 or 23 at the time, and I was still in the UFC because I had to ask them about permission. But at the same time, as cool as it sounded to wrestle Hashimoto, at the time, it just, even in my, that the UFC is like, nah, we can't have you we can't have you doing this. This isn't just, this doesn't really work for us, what we're doing. Like, okay. Also, I was also thinking like, what's really the point of me going out there and wrestling Shinya Hashimoto? Nobody's going to think I'm going to win. I've never done a match. It just, and Hashimoto at the time didn't lose at all. Like, this guy, I don't know if, I'd have to look it up on like Cage Match or one of those websites, but there was a point at which every time I came across a Hashimoto clip or blurb or anything about, he never put anyone over for like years upon years. When after leaving New Japan, it seemed like he was just, every single match he won all the time. And I thought, well, it doesn't really do anything for me. Doesn't really do anything for him. And the UFC says no anyway. So it was like, well, no, I had to tell the person who had contacted me. I was like, no, I can't do it. So, but I don't regret it. I do regret never being able to be in the ring with Hashimoto, but just in general, like, I always had the idea of the potential of doing some pro wrestling in the back of my head. Never did I imagine that I would be taken under the wing by Antonio Inoki and training with Billy Robinson and Carl Gotch and learning from everybody on the road like Jushin Liger and Yuji Nagata and Chono and a whole laundry list of names who have helped me out along the ways, and saw that somebody who was coming from being a shoot fighting world champion, number one in the world guy in MMA, coming to them as a total newbie and not telling them, oh yeah, I know, or anything, but just being like, hey, teach me.
As far as Bobby Lashley, you had a pretty good match with him in TNA. Well, I guess he went back to wrestling for the money, but how do you think he would have done had he continued to pursue MMA? Because he seemed pretty good at it.
I think our match in IGF was much better, but nonetheless, I think he would have racked up quite a laundry list of victories under his belt. I used to train and corner Bobby for a lot of his fights, and it's it used to be if he would drop into town, even while he was still in TNA, and he was still able to fight here and there. And he's like, hey, I'm dropping through LA for something. You around? Like, yep, all right. Well, I only have a little bit of time, so, and I might be in my backyard in Hollywood at the time, holding pads for Bobby, just working with him, shooting the shit, talking life. Or he'd come out here and spend some time doing training camps, or he'd come and I'd go to the Air Force Academy and train with Joel Sherritt up there, and Bobby would come up to the campus and he'd come out there and be a part of my training camps. Bobby Lashley he's one of my boys. So fighting wise, I mean, he could still be taking people's heads off and shooting 3-pointers with them if he wants to. I don't blame him for going back to the WWE and doing what he's done, because he's been there a long time doing great stuff, and I just only hope for more awesome things for Bobby. I think that even with all the accolades under his belt, I feel like there's still so much more that can be done with him, and I think just incredibly highly of Bob.
Last question here. With all the money being thrown around these days in wrestling, like it's absolutely ridiculous the money people are making these days. Are you tempted at all to try and go full time with AEW or WWE? I know you've done well for yourself over the years, but it's got to be a little bit tempting when you see some of these contracts.
Yeah, well, and as a manager, I see these contracts, so I know what's out there. It's it's not just a simple matter of like, oh, I could just go out there and wrestle 290 days out of the year or whatever. It's more than that. I have a different life set up underneath me. I've got students in professional fighting and wrestling. I've got a distillery. I've got a new line of MMA training gear and clothing coming out called War Materials. We've released our first release was a collaboration with the death metal band Amon Amarth, and that sold smashingly well. Like all the items sold out almost right away. And we're going to do a special seminar at Bloodstock Open Air Festival. It's a big heavy metal open air festival out there in England. So we're going to be doing that in August, and it sold out in a mere few hours to help promote our new line. I've got a lot of different things on my plate, not to mention booker, producer, agent, all the things that come with running professional wrestling shows and putting them together, be it in Japan or with Brett here in the US. I got a full plate, and I love wrestling. So the opportunity to do meaningful stuff in WWE or AEW or TNA or something like that, I'm totally open to it, because I love wrestling. I love having the opportunity to get out there and face somebody that I think is worthwhile to do it, and to create a moment for that time that we meet. I love it. But as for like chasing after, I mean, everybody's got my number. So if they want to bring me into the fold for something, then it's not really very difficult. But I'm not out there trying to kick someone's door in, telling them like, oh, look at this huge program I got all lined up. Just hire me to do it and put me in. It's not needed. I can go anywhere and work anyone anywhere. But it's 46. I got a lot left in the tank, but my pathway is going to be a little bit different.
And of course, speaking of a lot less in the tank, are you going to be wrestling on this July 28th Bloodsport event in Brooklyn?
Well, that's the intention. I wrestled Moxley in Bloodsport Bushido in the main event. We ended up going 22, 23, 20 out of 25 minutes possible. And then I followed that up on July 1st taking on Yu Izuka and Glate in a UWF match. And while, big difference between a young, much smaller up and comer like Izuka, who has a great potential future, and a hardened heavyweight veteran like John Moxley, it's night and day. But I can go out there and go. I've got plenty to offer, and what the Bloodsport shows, this is my battleground. So it is the place that you're going to find me the most. And we're looking out there for the right potential victim. Oh, I'm sorry, I mean opponent for this upcoming card.
All right. So where can people find more information on that, and where can they follow you if they want more information on you?
I think the best thing is go to @JoshL Barnett on Twitter or Instagram as far as social media is concerned. I'm on Facebook at Josh Barnett Official. And you can see me also at joshbarnett.com, which has links and a whole bunch of other flair and such around what I do. I can point you to all my instructional videos with BJJ Fanatics. If you are an MMA grappler or a professional wrestler wanting to learn the skills of catch wrestling and add to your arsenal, or to get a good start, a foundation underneath you, to improve what you do as a pro wrestler, a fighter, a grappler, any of these aspects of combat sports, you can see these instructionals at bjjfanatics.com right now. Just look up Josh Barnett, and there'll be more in the future as well. You can go to the War Materials website, look it up, War Materials MMA or War Materials Josh Barnett, and you'll find our gear and clothing offerings there. I should think that's the best, outside of if you like to have a big, smoky, amazing glass of whiskey, then I would go to warbringerbourbon.com.
Very good. And I really appreciate your time. I'll let you close this off with whatever you want to tell the fans to shut this down.
Bloodsport Bushido was an incredible experience, something I really never thought would come to reality. And I have to say, it's the best looking show that I have ever done or been a part of. So if you want to see legends of the ring that you do not see in the United States, like Kazushi Sakuraba, Masakatsu Funaki, Rampage Jackson, myself, although you can't see me here, you can still watch Bloodsport Bushido on Triller TV. And you can go ahead and order the pay-per-view for $19.99, and it'll live in your library to watch it again as much as you like. And we also have plans to release a special edition Blu-ray, because while I know everybody is moving towards streaming and pretty much all aspects, I personally still think physical media is key in this world, because at the end of the day, no matter what you purchase digitally, technically it's just a long-term rental. Or anything you purchase physically, you own that. And we plan to put different special behind-the-scenes footage, photos, and other elements onto this Blu-ray to make it something that will be filled with content you'll only get there. So when that's available, we'll be letting you know. It'll be available for global sales. And we've got Josh Barnett's Bloodsport 11 coming up in Brooklyn. This is the 11th show between that me and Brett and GCW have put together. And, again, you're going to find what has put us on the lips and out of the mouths of so many people out there, especially now where the almost unbelievable is happening. And that is, talent from WWE is coming and making their way to the Bloodsport ring to see what they're made of. So come check us out live. There may be a few tickets left. Or if you can't make it there live, watch us live, streaming on Triller TV through Triller Plus.